one of the first things that I'll see is when people are kind of early on hiring or they're looking to hire someone, often they try to hand off too many roles to one person. And so someone, who's doing a ton of stuff, they think, oh, I need to hire like this project management person and just take all of this off, or like they just try to almost clone themselves, is one of those mistakes that people often make, especially when they're kind of early in that stages of shifting from like entrepreneur to building their team.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Productize My Service podcast. Today, I am joined with Jake Jorgovan. You may know the name. He's very active in the Productize service space, and he currently runs Lead Cookie, which is a LinkedIn lead generation productized service. As well, he runs a podcast production service called Content Allies, where they help B2B companies build revenue-generating podcasts. So obviously a lot to kind of break down and discuss of what Jake is working on. This episode is actually going to be a little bit different because I think whenever you're trying to scale a service business, right, you're kind of solving two problems. You're scaling people and you're scaling technology. And people is one of the bottlenecks in scaling a productized service. You have a lot of contractors and moving parts, and people make things a lot more complicated, right? So what I wanted to jam with Jake on specifically was hiring. He's able to have grown Lead Cookie and Content Allies. They've essentially run themselves in many respects, and it's no secret why. It's because he's been able to hire really great people. So he came on and actually did a masterclass for my private group called How to Succeed in Your Next Hire. So this is jam-packed with some really, really, really good information around hiring, how to look at hiring, when to hire, and I wanted to share this episode with you. Since it is a masterclass, obviously just audio will work. You'll get a lot of good takeaways, but if you do want to head over to the actual episode, either on YouTube or our website, you'll actually be able to get the visuals, the slides, and actually see kind of what he's talking about as well, because there was a lot of visual elements as he went through kind of his presentation deck. So, definitely bookmark this one, as it's going to be something you'll be able to use for many, many hires in the future. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Looks like we are live. I was just going to check on Facebook. Should be going.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Perfect. Yeah, guys. Well, appreciate it. For those of you guys who are going to be able to hop on live here, we'll be getting some people shortly. Today we're joined with Jake from Content Allies, as well Lead Cookie, as well other projects. Jake has all the stuff he's working on. I was excited to have him on today to talk about hiring specifically, because I know this is a huge part of growing a successful service business. Majority of your leverage is with people and technology, but the people aspect is sometimes the hardest part to actually get right. So I think this will be a fun presentation. So Jake, maybe give it just a quick background on yourself, and then we can kind of jump into the presentation.
Yeah, so my name is Jake Jorgovan. I am the founder of Lead Cookie and Content Allies. And so in total, we've got about 30 team members across the two companies. And so we've done a ton of hiring, built it up. I have Lead Cookie to where it literally runs on just a few hours of my time each week. I don't even show up for the team meetings anymore, which is cool. And typically just own a project or two each quarter. And Content Allies, I spend a bit more time on still, but have that very much well running without me. So one of the things that I've been really strong at is hiring people, giving people ownership over stuff and just letting them run it. And so that's kind of the goal of this presentation today, is to dive through everything I've learned on just how to succeed, not just in hiring, but getting new hires ramped up and integrated into your company as well.
Man, I love it. Okay, cool. Well, I know you got a presentation prepared.
Yep.
And sorry, I got a little sore throat here, getting over a cold. So
no worries. I'll do the talking here. I'll dive through the presentation, and then happy to do Q&A here at the end. So feel free to drop questions throughout, and then I'll answer them as well at the end there.
Awesome.
Cool. Alrighty. Can you just let me know that you can see my screen, Tyler?
Yep, there you go.
Cool.
Should be good. I'll go ahead and drop off here, but you are good to go moving forward, and I'll ping you if anything comes up.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll be walking through today, again, how to succeed in your next hire. To kick off, here's what to kind of expect in today's call. We're going to cover a lot of ground. Really just been trying to refine this presentation and share everything I know. So we're going to start off with some common hiring mistakes that I see people make. We're going to dive into who to hire, how to figure out what that next hire in your company should actually be, what roles you should be looking for. We're going to talk about how to design the application and actually getting that, how to make sure that that's very little work on you and attracts the right kind of candidates. We're then going to talk about getting applicants. How do you actually go about getting people to apply for that? We'll talk about successful interviewing tactics and how to think about interviewing and handling that. We're going to talk about why you must have a 90-day success plan for new hires and how to create those in a successful way. We'll talk a bit about how to not suck at management once you hire someone new, as well as kind of some of the phases of leadership that, you know, your hire may fit in these kind of different buckets, and just as ways to kind of think about that. We'll talk about kind of compensation and incentives for team members, as well as, you know, when do you hire contractors versus full-time. And then lastly, diving into some of the tactical things on how do you actually pay people, because that can actually be challenging at times, especially when you're working with global team members. So a lot of ground to cover today, so excited to dive in. So I already gave a bit of background on myself, but again, just a quick intro. Was once a solo consultant, so literally about 3 years ago, it was pretty much just me, and I didn't have a team at all. And over the past 3 years, I've grown Lead Cookie to a team roughly about 25 people, a mixture of full-time and part-time. Again, I spend about 3 or 4 hours per week on that while I'm focused on building Content Allies. And Content Allies, we're at a team of roughly about 12, again, with a mixture of probably quite a bit more part-time there, but we've got about, 5 core full-time people, and then probably get about 6 to 7 part-timers. And I also do kind of business advising and coaching on the side of that as well, since I kind of don't have to work in these companies a lot and I enjoy it. So that's a bit about myself. Diving into the hiring mistakes, some of the top hiring mistakes that really see people make is one of the first things that I'll see is when people are kind of early on hiring or they're looking to hire someone, often they try to hand off too many roles to one person. And so someone, who's doing a ton of stuff, they think, oh, I need to hire like this project management person and just take all of this off, or like they just try to almost clone themselves, is one of those mistakes that people often make, especially when they're kind of early in that stages of shifting from like entrepreneur to building their team. And that's one of the big mistakes of getting into this frame where you can't hire, you're not going to clone yourself. You're not going to find someone else who can do all of the same things you can do. But instead, you're almost going to like carve out individual roles and individual areas that they're going to take off of your plate. And so when people try to kind of carve out too much, or they try to just like hand over a bunch of the work they do, that tends to not go well. And so getting very specific in the roles that you're hiring and being very intentional is very much a key thing. And we're going to dive a bit more into that in this presentation. Another big mistake, which this presentation, I'm not going to dive too much into hiring salespeople, but one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is handing off sales because they don't like it. And that is a huge mistake. Because it's just almost always fails. And like when a sales hire works is when your sales process is working, it's doing extremely well. You've figured that out as the entrepreneur, and now you're hiring someone to replace you in it. And you're not just getting in sales. Like when someone hires sales because they don't like it or sales isn't performing well, that is a recipe for a terrible hire. You hire sales when sales is going so well and you don't have time to run sales anymore. So again, just a big mistake I see a ton of people make there. Another mistake, hiring a good person without a clear fit of what they will be doing. This is a big thing where I see people often maybe trying to hire friends, family members, stuff like that. And they, maybe a past colleague or something, and they say, oh, this is a great person, like they're really smart and talented, and they're trying to fit this good person into their company. Again, another just recipe for disaster, because if you don't have a clear role of what they're going to be doing, then even if they're a great worker, a great person, like they're not going to succeed. They're not going to provide value. It's just going to be not good either all around. Other mistake is then once you get someone on board, being a poor manager and delegator to the person, not letting them know how to succeed, what their responsibilities are, like not giving them clear direction, which we're going to again dive a lot more into that today. And then the last mistake I'll say is failing to recruit early is another big part of this. And we'll dive into this in the application process, but you want to recruit weeks or even months before making a key hire. And all of my biggest hiring mistakes have come because I was hiring in a frenzy because I didn't prepare for it. And I then only had like a few weeks to get up a job posting and try to get some applicants and try to make a hire. And whenever you're trying to get up a job posting and make a hire in like a matter of weeks, like you don't get all of the good applicants that you can. And where you're in a much better spot is, say you recruit months before a new hire and you've got just this like backlog of applicants. And then when you go to make the hire, you've got way more to choose from. It's got more, and like you're not kind of pulling from a smaller pool. So recruiting early, just another really important thing. And when people fail to do this, this is almost where every single one of my bad hires has come from, is when I did not recruit early. So that's kind of some of the key hiring mistakes that I wanted to hit on. And we're going to dive a lot more into how to avoid some of these throughout this. So the next thing is the question is who to actually hire. Seems kind of like this could be obvious, but one of the big things is companies are growing and trying to figure out, okay, who's my next hire? Like what's that next lever that I pull? Who's the next person that I need to be pulling in? Is it a marketer? Is it project management? Do I need a virtual assistant? Do I need a salesperson? Like, what am I looking at here? And so one of the things for kind of entrepreneurs and small businesses, the biggest way that I look at this is using this activity called activity log. And so this is, again, a piece that came from Strategic Coach, which is a great framework where basically for 2 to 3 weeks, I typically do this whenever I find I'm getting really busy as an entrepreneur and I got a lot of stuff going on or too much on my plate. And what I'll do is for 2 to 3 weeks, I'll write down every single task that I do. So like literally I'll just keep typically like a open, document on my computer or something. Some people do it on a notepad next to their desk, and you write down everything you do from like, okay, cool, giving a webinar versus like, okay, I'm dealing with like payroll. Okay, I'm dealing with delegating tasks to virtual assistants. Okay, I'm doing outreach. I'm having sales calls. I'm creating proposals. Like, what are all of like the tasks that you do? And when you do this for 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to end up with this massive list of everything that you as the entrepreneur right now are spending your time on. And what you do then is, after you've got that in about 2 to 3 weeks, you'll have probably captured the pretty most large cycle of most of the work, or how you spend most of your time. And what you can then start to do is then categorize those tasks into 3 buckets. Things that are really irritating and like drain the life out of you, and that you're just like, I hate this task and I want this gone. And you can have things that, okay, these are okay, I can be all right with them, I'm pretty good at them, but I don't love them, but like I can deal with this. And then things that are fascinating. And so fascinating would be like, when like this, if I could spend all day doing this stuff, like I would just be happy as can be. And you start to kind of build this, and then like your real next hire should probably come from those areas of irritating or okay. Like you want to get rid of those things that are draining energy from you, or maybe things that are in the okay category, or are things that you're like, I can do it, but like there's probably better people to do it. For example, things for me around like project management, or handling like strategy for clients. It's like I'm okay at that stuff, but there's people that love project management. They just love organizing all day, and there's people that love working with clients on strategy. And it's like, while I can do that, at some point, it's not what I love. And so these are, again, areas to look at, to kind of do it with like the goal of eventually you make enough hires to where like you're just doing fascinating stuff all day. And that's like awesome and fun as an entrepreneur, and you're getting to do what you're uniquely meant to do. So this is one of the activities that I recommend anybody when like you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're like, okay, we're growing, I got too much on my plate. We need to make a hire. I don't know who next. Like, this is a great way to start to look at that and also kind of build the roles and responsibilities for that future person. And some other ways to think around this is that, like, what you hate, someone else will love. And so, as odd as it is, like, I remember when starting Lead Cookie, like, a lot of what we do is like really boring, monotonous work where every day you just go in and do the same repetitive stuff. And what's blew my mind when I started making hires was realizing that, like, while I hated like the in the weeds work of that company, there are people that love it. And I remember having a conversation with a team member when we almost kind of tried to promote her to a strategy level. And she's like, I just want to wake up every day and know exactly what I'm going to do that day and then get it done. And then, like, I don't want to have any surprises. And just realizing that other people can have completely different, what they enjoy or what unique or what they like to them. So that's just a thing to realize, is that it's, even if it's the work that you hate, someone else is going to love that. Another question is like, where are you becoming a bottleneck to your own business? For me, this was definitely, at points when I realized, like, I was doing a poor job at client strategy. While I could do it, I didn't like it enough. And, like, I was doing a poor job at that. And it was probably causing more churn or worse client experiences versus finding someone who just loved to service clients all day and loves building relationships with them. And so that's the thing, again, where, like, where are you, like, doing a suboptimal job because you're sitting in a seat that someone else could be doing better? And the last kind of frame also to look at is another way is, like, are you doing $5 an hour work, $10 an hour work, $50, $100, $1,000 per hour work? But it's an interesting thing. You can also look at that activity log and be like, okay, what is the value of this? And what's really sometimes interesting, and this, like, weird thing that we'll do as entrepreneurs, is sometimes we'll sit there and do $5 an hour work because, like, it's just easy. And, like, I remember there were points where it was like, back, like, like, even doing cold email, and I'd be like, like, literally, like, trying to clean up cold email lists, and it's like data entry work. But I would do it just because it was, like, easy and it gave me some sense of success in, like, finishing something. But it's like, when you look at that and you're like, wow, like, I should not be doing that. And that's something that's, again, another really interesting kind of, like, frame you can put on that activity log, because you want to be doing the high value work and then hiring out that low value work to other people to free up more of your time. So again, those are just some frames to kind of help you start to analyze your time as an entrepreneur and figure out where your next hire needs to come from. All right, so now we're going to talk about designing the application. And so this is really fun one here, but somewhere along the line, I heard of this idea of creating a gauntlet style application. And the whole goal of this is to kind of mindset is to put the work on the applicant. And so you weed out the poor fits and spend less time reviewing applications. And so I'll kind of walk you through this, but the core key of this is basically you're going to try to make a lot of work in your application so that A, you can weed out people that aren't a good fit. And then B, you can kind of also catch people that aren't detail oriented. So we have our job posting up here, which, again, we kind of sell people. We talk about our culture here and everything here. We share, what the role is, what they should be expecting. We share kind of everything about the ideal candidate. So this is like your kind of standard job candidate stuff that we're putting in there. We also put in our company values, so someone knows kind of what we value. And then this is where it gets fun, is for our application process. We basically have them create a Google Doc. They have their name, email, URL, their LinkedIn profile. They need to write us a cover letter, why they should hire us. We have them record an application video or audio message where they basically say moist as the first word, toodaloo as the last word, and then they play Mozart's Fifth in the background. And so, again, just really over the top ridiculous. And then we have them upload this video to Dropbox. And then this is the key detail that all the non-detail oriented people miss, but add the Dropbox link as a verifiable item to your Google Doc after your cover letter and questions. And so, again, seem like this little thing here, we know when we open it up and it's like, okay, this is step 4. Someone put the Dropbox links right here. They didn't read the details. And it's like a simple thing, but, like, that's kind of stuff like weeds people out for, like, project managers and everything like this. And so the whole goal of this is to create this kind of thing. We ask them to send us like a funny video, kind of cultural stuff here, and send this application in with a particular way that they kind of do their subject line and everything. And the whole goal of this is to basically have it to where, if you don't do this, you'll get 150 applicants for something. And it's just like a bunch of resumes, and it's overwhelming. And like, you have no way to filter through that. And it just takes tons of time to go through 150 applicants and tons of interviews. With this, like, we'll typically be reviewing maybe 5 to 10 applicants seriously, interview 3 to 4, and make a hire out of that. And it's just a way to kind of, again, put the work on the applicants and less work on you as the company as hiring. And it's interesting because like some people get annoyed at it, but those are probably not good culture fits for us. And we get on the calls with people and they're like, I get what you're doing with that application. And I knew that if I did it, I actually had a shot. And so the people that actually do it, they just like, they're probably already going to be a good fit for us. So again, really cool way to just try to design your applications. And again, you can kind of really kind of customize that or tweak that however you want. But that kind of general process is just a great way to weed out applicants. So that's a bit on designing the application. The next thing I want to dive into is, okay, how do you actually get applicants? And this is a fun one here where it's really not that complicated. Like, there's a handful of job sites that we'll typically post to. I'll share just kind of some of my favorites here. HireMyMom.com is a great one. We hire tons of stay-at-home moms. It's been a great persona for us. Upwork is, again, a place we go to very often, and we'll kind of modify that job process I showed you to make it into an Upwork posting. Dynamite Jobs, another one that I use very frequently. And again, there's a bunch of others out there. These are just the ones that we've kind of consistently had pretty good results with. And then, some of the other things you can look at is Facebook groups for the skills you need. So we'll post our jobs in certain like content marketing forums if we're looking for writers, or on virtual assistant communities or stuff like that if we're looking for VAs. You can also share your job posting on LinkedIn and ask for referrals. You can ask friends and colleagues. And honestly, one of the really interesting things is just asking your current team members. Like, once you start to build a team, like, I swear probably 70% of the Lead Cookie team is just all friends of Mari Carr, who's one of our team members. And like, she just brought her entire friend group, and like, they're all great. And so you sometimes, like, A players tend to know other A players. And so if you can just find a few good people and then just kind of keep expanding and building from them and their referrals, it goes a super long way. Yeah, so that's kind of what we've got on the applications, getting applicants process. Next, we'll dive into the interviewing process. And so for interviewing, there's a few things that I typically do with this. One is that basically I do kind of what I call like pre-interviewing, where I just email back and forth a few times with the person. And this could really be about anything. It doesn't really matter what it is, but typically from their application, I'll just find something and I'll ask them a few questions before I hop on a call. And the purpose of this is that I want to see how they communicate in written word. And it's a simple thing, but if you think about it, today's day and age, like, so much business is done through Slack, through email communication, going back and forth. And so how someone writes is a very important skill. So I know that if a person sends back a giant block of text with like no paragraphs and like run-on sentences and like poor grammar, like, that's probably not going to be a good fit. But if someone writes back and it's like, hey, this is like a well-written email, like it's cohesively thought out, like it's, it makes sense, like that's a good sign. And so again, emailing back and forth a few times is going to give you just a context for how they're going to communicate in written. And that'll honestly like weed out a lot of people, which is actually another, just saves you some time. And then when I get to someone who like makes it through there and I go to the actual interview, it's honestly really simple. Like, the kind of thing is just kind of asking a bit more about them, sharing the role about what they will be doing and kind of what this role is going to be. And then really the goal is to evaluate like, hey, is this a good fit? Do we think you're a good fit for the role? Does the role we have, the compensation we have, does that align with what you're looking for in your life? Does this sound like something you're interested in? And it's just kind of having that conversation. And so again, it's just nothing like super intense there, but that's like kind of the general framework. But one of the things I ultimately look for is with his like do you get along with this person? Like, do you have some sort of connection? And like the way to like look at this is like, would I want to hang out with this person at a barbecue? Or if we had like a company picnic or something, even if it were all digital, like, would this person fit in? Because that's assuming that someone can do the work and you have a handful of candidates who can do the work. The real question is like, who is culture fit? Who do you enjoy talking with? Who do you feel like is going to get along with the rest of the team really well? And so again, that's kind of what I look at down to. It's nothing too crazy. You're just trying to evaluate if it's a fit, kind of clear out the details. Sometimes I'll even try to talk someone out of the role and see if like they're really wanting and like kind of say everything negative about the role. But really you're just trying to see like, is this going to be a fit? Do I think they're going to be able to do the role? And if yes, do I think they're going to culturally fit in? So that's the kind of piece on interviewing. It doesn't have to be super complex there. You're just having conversations. Some other things here that kind of help in this process is that I do think personality profiles can be helpful for an added layer of certainty. And so, for example, there's tons of ones out here like DISC personality, strength finder, stuff like that. There's this one that we use often called it's like mynextmove.org, which is like this thing to help people figure out their next career jump. But it's interesting because like it's just sometimes, I guess where these are helpful is as an entrepreneur, sometimes we will gravitate to people that are like us. And that's actually sometimes really bad for hires. As I mentioned, some of the best team members we have at Lead Cookie are people who are really like monotonous stuff. Like they're very not creative people. And so it's weird because like that to me, like I may not like totally jive with them in all capacities because they're just so drastically different, but that doesn't mean they can't be a great team members. And so we would often do this. And we know that if we get someone who's like a really creative person who's going into kind of like an operational role at our company where it's going to be like very project management, organizing kind of basis, like they're probably not going to be a good fit. And so these personality profiles, I think, are some other ways to kind of help if you're trying to find a certain type of role. And it's also just a filter for you to kind of make sure you're not just hiring the people that you get along with and that are most like you, which is a bias that is very easy to happen. Another thing I do to remove biases is if you can have a second person on your team interview them. And that's another thing where, again, most of the bad hires I made, I hired solo. And I definitely have avoided a lot of bad hires by having a second person on my team interview them as well and kind of help kind of, give input into that decision. And it definitely can help remove some of my biases as well. So that's what we have on the interviewing. And so let's say you go through all that, you get a hire, you get them, they're successful, they come in with you. Next question is like, how do you get them to succeed within your organization? And the biggest key here is to create a 90-day success plan. And this is super simple and it sounds so obvious in retrospect, but so many people don't do it. But it's just a simple document that details what is success in 90 days for this new team member. How are you going to know that this was a good hire 90 days from now and that this person is successful? And so again, this is super valuable. You want to be clear as possible as to like, what are they going to be responsible for? What are they going to be ramped up with? Are you the entrepreneur not going to be doing anymore that they're going to be doing? And what you want to do is just get very clear on what is 90-day success and then write a plan of action and a roadmap for getting them there. Because this is one of the biggest things where people will hire someone and they just kind of toss them into the weeds. But if someone doesn't know like what they're working toward, then they're going to be frustrated because they're not going to know what to do. You're going to be frustrated. And so you want to have this plan of action for them. And that's going to help you both get aligned and make sure that they are working toward what it is that you want them to move toward. And so with that, within that 90 days, there's typically kind of some phases of success or ramping up. And one of the biggest ways I look at this is, for most hires, you're going to kind of go through this kind of shadowing kind of thing. And so I like this analogy of kind of, if you've ever seen like a waiter at a restaurant being trained, it's basically like the first phase is like they just kind of follow someone around. They shadow and absorb information and they watch what the experienced waiters do. And the second stage, basically, their boss kind of shadows them while they're doing the work and they're actually going to tables. And then eventually, like they kind of go off on their own while their boss is checking in on the work. Maybe he's still kind of like overseeing and stuff. And then eventually, like, they just kind of own their role. And that's kind of the same exact kind of flow that you're going to do where, for example, when handing over strategy at Lead Cookie, for a while, like, I just shadowed for like a month or so while I was running calls with customers, doing strategies, and I'd sit with them live, work with them. I'd show them what I do. And then eventually I started having him run calls, but then I would be kind of showing up on them, and then I'd be checking everything on the back end before we send it off to the client. So I'm shadowing him as he's doing the work. And the third phase, I'm kind of like, okay, cool. You can just go start running these calls on your own. And I'll kind of check in on the work. Like, you send me the strategies before you send it out to the client. I'll double check everything and, kind of previewing all that before it goes out. And then eventually you just kind of let someone go with it. And then it's like, now it's just like, okay, what's our churn rate? That's what we're really measuring our account strategists by. Like, how well are you retaining customers? And so it's kind of now based off of a KPI, and I don't need to check in on that anymore because he owns the role and he really kind of owns that. And so that's kind of what you want to think through with these hires is like, what are those phases that they're going to go through, and what is the timeline for going through those phases? But this is kind of just a real simple framework, especially to hand off more complex roles like sales or strategy or project management or things like that. The other thing you definitely want to do within that 90-day success plan is get really detailed to what someone's roles and responsibilities are going to look like when they're fully ramped. And again, so, ambiguity is the enemy here. You want to be crystal clear as to what they're handling, what they're not. And so that way, there's no gray zones on, okay, I'm hiring a salesperson, but it's like, is that salesperson closing deals, or are they closing deals and generating leads? Like, are they meant to prospect? Or are they just handling inbound? Like, you need to get really crystal clear as to what they're responsible on and like what they're going to be handling at the end of those 90 days. All right. Next one here on how to not suck at management. So you get someone here, you get the 90 days, you're in your 90 days or you're past it, and like, you want to actually lead team members and be well. Because this is one of the biggest things where, again, it's not just making the hire, but it's actually learning how to lead the hires. And there's so much to learn here, but one of the biggest favorite quotes that I have is, when someone fails to deliver, first look at the manager, AKA yourself. And so, especially if you're new to hiring, like, if your team members are failing to deliver, or something's coming back and it's wrong, people are missing timelines or something, I will say most cases it's likely not their fault. It's probably yours. It may be, if it's consistent problem, it is the person's fault, but it's often whenever people come to me and they say, I'm having problems with a team member, it's because they're not giving clear expectations. They're not giving clear deadlines. They're not defining exactly what success is to the new hire. And so again, when someone is not succeeding, they're not doing what you want, first look at yourself and say, like, am I doing everything to give them what they need to succeed? Like, was it crystal clear? And that's one of the first things I would always say, to kind of look at that. The other thing you want to do is provide consistent feedback from day one. And so what you don't want to do, and a lot of people do, is they just kind of, they're just like, oh, cool, that looks good, that looks good, that looks good. And then when something's wrong, then they start giving feedback, and that's not good because it kind of almost gets the person scared or afraid of feedback. And so what you want to be doing is find something to, we use this thing like a compliment sandwich, but you want to, every time someone delivers something to you, a new hire, you want to compliment them, find some level of constructive criticism or area that they can improve, and then let them know they did a good job. And like, when you get into this, it's a consistent feedback loop where they're used to getting feedback and suggestions from you as a manager, and it creates this healthy dynamic on it. Recommended reading I always have for someone who, if you're getting new to kind of management, or even if you've been there before, the 1 Minute Manager. Super easy book. You can read it in about an hour, and it's just very tactical to help you get better at leading and managing people. So those are some basic things to actually help that person become better. Another one of my favorite tools here is Impact Filter. And so this is another one from Strategic Coach, and I'll kind of share what this looks like here, but this is kind of a simple template here where it's really, say I'm launching a project. I'll actually kind of pull up my example one here. But there was a point about 6 months ago at Content Allies, where it's like we were starting to grow and our operations was definitely failing. And so I put this thing like impact filter together for my ops person saying like, okay, we need to make operations improvements. We need a not rock solid operations behind the new model. So it's this kind of fresh questions of like, what do you want to accomplish? What is the difference this is going to make? Like, why is this important? What is the ideal outcome? And what are the success criteria? Like, what has to be true when this is finished? And this is super important just because like it helps you frame up everything. It's almost like that 90-day success plan we talked about, but you can do this for, say, projects or initiatives to make sure you get everyone aligned and going in the same direction on a project here. So I use these all the time as a tool to really like go to my team members and say, hey, like this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build playbooks, or we're trying to build this new service line. And like, this is what success means when we're at the end. And you can use this as a great tool as a way to kind of get people aligned in that same direction and define success for them. So again, one of my favorite tools on just how to actually manage people better. I've got a link here. I'll share the slides and everything here, but there's also an article from Strategic Coach about the impact filter, or you can Google this in more detail, but phenomenal tool that I use all the time. And so now we're going to get into our last few topics here. The phases of leadership is another really important one that I want to hit on. And it's also just really important to understand where your kind of hire is going to sit in this phases of leadership and what you're looking at. So, there's kind of 3 levels here, which I'll dive into. It's going to be delegation, responsibility, and then ownership are kind of your 3 levels. And the key is at the start here, at like first level, whenever someone's looking to hire, is like you're just learning how to delegate. So like you tell one task that they need to do, and then they come back to you and they do the task. And so this could be a virtual assistant doing really basic support for you, or say a contractor fulfilling deliverables based on your instructions. Hey, write this article or create this video, and you give them something specific and they come right back to you. And so that's kind of like your first phase. And hires in this area can be a lot simpler. It's not as complex. It's not as, they're very interchangeable. So if you're looking at hire here, it's something you don't need to sweat too much on because your hires, you can very easily swap them out. There's very little back and forth that you need to worry about, or onboarding time for something here. So these kind of hires are much, much easier to kind of go into. The second hire, which a lot of times level 2 will eventually evolve to level 3, but this is where you're maybe making a hire that you're giving someone a target to accomplish, but they're going to have to chart the course and figure it out. So examples of this might be hiring someone to kind of, what if like I'm going to give a team member, hey, I want you to create 12 pieces of content this next quarter that's going to strategically grow our business in the next 90 days. So you're giving them kind of a specific kind of goal to go toward. You're giving them a timeline. But like ultimately they're going to be doing the work and kind of figuring out a lot of stuff along the way without you saying, hey, these are what all 12 pieces of content need to be. So it's kind of like you're getting to this, it's a step up from delegation. You give people a lot more freedom over the work. Another thing could be like, documenting all the existing process in a playbook or creating like that. That's something where, again, I'm not going to tell you exactly what needs to be done, but like, hey, we need this documented in our playbook. And so this is next level. And again, these hires tend to be where a lot of, I would say, more senior level hires start. And then a lot of senior level hires will eventually, like your goal is to kind of level up your phase as a leader and your team member as a team member to where like they're really getting over to a level of ownership. And what I mean by that is eventually like getting to the point where you're ramping up your team members to where they're taking ownership over a particular domain and they're setting their own targets and priorities. So example of this, over at Content Allies, like our video department was having some issues. And I didn't tell my team to fix this. My ops person kind of just owned this. She knew that, hey, like our videos, like we're not hitting our turnaround times. Like we've got a bottleneck in the process. Like she dove in and she figured out the solution and fixed it. And that's kind of what that gets to whenever you have someone who has ownership over an area where like they are just setting their own targets and they know what needs to be done and accomplished. Same thing at Lead Cookie. Like my head of sales has just taken ownership over our entire process. He updated it as he sees fit. Like it is a different process than what I handed over to him. And so he's just kind of evolved and grown that and taking that wherever he feels that it needs to be. And so the key difference as you kind of elevate this level of kind of from responsibility to ownership is that they are setting the targets. Like they're really just owning their domain. They're typically kind of just performing against business metrics, and they're setting the targets instead of me. And I might just kind of advise and help kind of guide them in the right direction or kind of coach them on what the right target could be. So those are some things, again, to look at and just recognize like what level of hire you're looking at. Because again, it's unlikely, someone's going to move directly into ownership, but it's helpful to know where someone is going to sit on that spectrum and just what you're looking for. Because again, individuals who can do that ownership roles, they tend to be expensive, but they are often like the biggest leverage jumps for entrepreneurs. Like when you get a head of ops who just can rock it and run your company, like it is awesome. It's a lot more expensive but it's than like delegating and managing all that stuff yourself. But whenever you can say like, hey, like project management's having some issues, like you just go figure it out, and someone just builds that system or refines it, like that's a super powerful spot to get to. The other alternative on that is like, you hire individuals who can only fulfill that delegation role. They tend to be low cost and replaceable, but like, again, you're going to be kind of managing a lot of that stuff. So, you're going to have a mixture of both of those in your business, but just something to be kind of conscious of as you're making those new hires. All right. Last couple sections here on compensation. A lot of people ask like how to determine how much you should pay a new hire. And one of the things that I always look at is, for contractors and deliverables, there's a general rule of thumb is that, you want to have a 35% maxed cost of goods sold for deliverables to the end client. So if something costs you $35 to create this design, you want to be charging at least $100 to the client for that, because you need to have room in the middle for your project management, your sales, your marketing budget, and then profit. And so 35% is like a maximum cost of goods sold, is like a general rule of thumb for like a healthy business. Definitely you can go lower than that. I know some companies that are able to run at like a 10-15% cost of goods sold, and they have great profitability, and then like, or maybe they've got more management overhead. But that is something I think definitely to look at, is that if you are not making at least 35%, like making, at least 65% margins on your COGS, like that is not a good spot to be at. And so that's what I look at whenever I'm looking at saying like hiring a contractor, a writer, an hourly person, or an editor or something. So that's things to look at there. For full-time hires, typically we'll look at research on what is comparable industry rates for similar roles. And so again, there's a ton of sites out there like Glassdoor and sites like this that have data on this. And really kind of the rate you pay someone, like that can give you kind of a frame, and then you can kind of choose based on experience. So for example, if you hire someone who's like really pro and experienced, who's like probably smarter than you and better than you in the role, then you're probably going to be paying on the mid to high end of the scale. If you're looking for an entry-level person, which again can also be a great level, I actually really enjoy hiring entry-level people and then leveling them up. You can often pay on the lower end of the scale and then raise them up over their time as they get better. But again, it's going to require probably a bit more training or time investment from you. No right way or wrong way on that, but that's just some different kind of ways to think about it, or how to figure out what to expect to pay for, say, like a full-time role of a project manager or a strategist or something like that. So those are some just kind of pieces there. And then the other thing is, for incentive structures, and that is also super important. So for lower level hires, this can often be a really simple incentive structure, raises based on time and performance and reliability. So if someone's just doing great work, you just maybe give them a bonus here or there. You raise them up over time after they've been with you for 3 months or 6 months or a year or whatever that is. And so those are very, very simple there. But if you're, say, getting a senior level manager, like hire someone who's going to be like running ops, running strategy, something like that for your company, you really do want to get a good incentive structure, because like that is, it will light people up whenever they figure out how to, earn more money. Like as much as people don't want to admit it, like they're motivated by money. So what you want to do is design incentives based against key milestones that person can influence. And so, for example, you might say, okay, whenever you achieve like X responsibility, like you have this off of my plate, you get Y raise. Or whenever a company achieves X milestone, you get Y. So for example, my ops director at Content Allies, is compensation is tied to like our monthly revenue, because ultimately at the end of the day, the ability for her to like of the company to grow and do great work is largely built on her to be able to run operations, to handle more clients, to be able to pull stuff off my plate so I can market more and attract more customers. And while she's not doing direct sales, like operations and revenue is just like it's very tied together. So that's a key one there. And the same for like strategist. It's tied to the her percentage of the strategy clients that she's managing. And so again, trying to figure out how you can design an incentive where it's attached to what that person can influence. Another thing is just asking them, what do you want? And, what are your goals? And it's in the design and incentive plan to get them there. But for some people, it's not always about the money. They might want to be evolving to doing a new role or new type of work. Or one of our designers, like she just really excited and enjoys learning new mediums and is starting to learn animation and video production and stuff. And so giving someone almost like a learning trajectory is sometimes a really exciting kind of path for someone as well. So again, a lot to go into here, but there can be a lot of depth in this one. It's a challenging one, and there's no easy answer to this, but it's all about getting creative and just figuring out how to align that incentive structure that's going to motivate someone, and it's something that they can influence and actually drive. And it's aligned with your business goals at the same time. All right. And so contractors versus full-time. Simple, quick question here, but I always get asked this question: do you hire, W-2 employees or contractors? And again, this is relevant to the USA. I know there's probably a lot of international companies here as well, but I'll give a kind of the quick overview. I'm not going to go too much into detail on this. And a quick disclaimer: I am not an attorney, so this is not a legal advice. But I'll tell you that the law is very much state to state. But for most small businesses, if you have someone who is a remote hire, who is working on their computer and makes their own hours, you can probably start as a contractor, especially if they're part-time or they're offshore. And so this is where, again, you can do a lot with contractors here. There's some states like Delaware and California are starting to make this really difficult. But there's a lot there. And again, alternatively, even if that's a challenge, like if you go offshore, then you don't have to worry about that at all, really. So yeah, there's a lot to go into there, but again, majority of our team members are contractors. And it just keeps it kind of simpler, and it's a lot less paperwork than the W-2 aggressively, like with W-2 member or team members in different states and stuff like that. So contractors tends to be the simpler way to go in this whole remote environment. And then last final topic of the day is paying team members. A simple logistical thing that always comes up is how do you actually pay people? And it sounds like it should be easy, but I swear this world is more complicated than it is. So some of the tools we use to pay people, we used PayPal for a long time, and then they kind of got annoyed at us. And for some reason started putting limits. And so we use TransferWise as our primary offshore payment now, PayPal for our US payment. We actually use Square, which is surprisingly has some great tools to pay 1099 contractors with, and it even will issue your 1099. So that's great for US 1099 contractors. We use Upwork a lot as well, especially there's certain countries like Egypt and stuff like that where it's really hard to pay people. So we kind of will pay through there. And then Payoneer is one that we actually ended up not using, but we kind of experimented with for a while. But these are all kind of the tools that we actually use to pay team members. But again, it doesn't have to be superly overcomplicated, but especially when you start getting international, different companies can be or different countries can have these odd regulations or wonkiness. PayPal doesn't work in every country of the world, and neither does TransferWise. So sometimes you have to kind of do a mix of these different services. So that is what we've got here, Tyler. That is it. So I will kick over to Q&A and let people chime in with their questions here.
Awesome. So some people did already have some questions. So I'm going to pull up the comment section.
Yeah.
Here.
Cool.
Yep. So I wrote one on behalf of Brendan, who wasn't able to make the call, but he messaged me beforehand, and he asked, how can you attract the right type of person that's willing to be coachable and follow the systems that you give them?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things for following the systems, that's one of the things we like to do, the gauntlet process, where you've kind of build all the details into the application process. So that's one where you're able to really quickly weed out people who don't follow the application process correctly. So that's one that I would look at. And then the coachable one, I think that's one that probably through like the interviewing conversations, you can kind of feel out. I'm not sure exactly what questions. I know that it's definitely a valuable thing, but one of the things that I'll actually often do, that I didn't actually share in here, but where a lot of my best hires have come from, have been freelancers who were working in the area of my business. So like I had a content writers that I've hired. I had a outbound consultants that I hired. And so they're working in the space, but they are kind of just like struggling as a freelancer. Like they're good at what they do, but they're not really good at like the running a business side of things. And like I find that those can make for really great hires whenever you're like, hey, like instead of running that whole business thing, like why don't you come work with me and like I'll teach you everything I know. And like, like I'm running this much more established company over here. We've got some good stuff going. Like you can come in and like run operations, or you can run sales, or you can run strategy. And like it's a really attractive appeal. Not everybody goes for it. I've tried, and some people are like, no, I'm gonna keep doing my own thing. But my head of strategy at Lead Cookie was a outbound consultant, like just kind of doing cold email campaigns before. The same with my head of sales. At Content Allies, my head of strategy was a freelance kind of copywriter and marketer. And the same for my head of operation. They were both kind of freelance, like content marketers, basically. And so that's what I think, where I think you can find really good coachable people, is when you've got those freelancers who are kind of struggling at the whole business side of thing. You're like, hey, like come work with me and I'll show you how to run a cool company. That's what I think I find to be like a really a great way to find, I guess, coachable people there.
Awesome. Anita asks, what would you suggest founders do if they don't have someone else to help them interview?
Yeah, I think if you don't have someone else to help interview, I think in the early days, like you can still run it on your own. I think personality tests, I would definitely lean on something like that. I think the biggest key is to just have a second source of just kind of like some way to kind of check yourself. So I would probably lean on the personality test more if you're on your own, if you don't have someone to help interview. But yeah, I mean, at some point, everybody's got to make their first few hires. Then you might not have someone to help. And yeah, and I'll tell you, I didn't always do great in my early ones. And so, you learn each time you make these, and if you make a bad hire, just cut it off sooner than later. But yeah, all in all, it's definitely something where it's just, I would just kind of say, just do the best you can with it. And yeah, that's where I kind of leave that.
Okay, awesome. We had another question come in from Sebastian. Do you adjust compensation based on where people live, even though the job is the same?
I would say so. It's a weird thing, but it's definitely, I mean, if you've got like, we kind of look at compensation based on like kind of their local market and everything. And often like the roles that we're doing may vary a bit, in complexity or how deep they get. But, it's just, if you're hiring someone in the Philippines versus someone in the States, like the compensation is just going to be drastically different. So typically do try to localize that. But we're hiring someone in the Philippines for a role, I'm gonna Google around and be okay, like what is the like rates for a full-time video editor in the Philippines or something like that. Or, what if say we're going to Eastern Europe? Like if you can Google around, you can typically find like what are the rough rates there. And so yeah, trying to find comparables for local markets is helpful.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think that's smart. Kind of looking at local markets. Cool. Seeing if there's any other questions. Looks like Anita said thanks so much. Michael just commented to make key hires months in advance. How do you know what roles those key hires will fill if they are months in advance?
Yeah. So this is like, give me a second here to pull something up. I will. Okay, give me 1 second here. I've got actually a great answer to that, which I was actually working with someone yesterday on, and so I've actually got a spreadsheet I'm trying to find.
Awesome.
All right. So let me share my screen here again. And so this is it's getting a little more advanced, but application window. All right. Can you see my screen over there, Tyler?
Yep. Let me go ahead and toss that up.
Yeah. So this is kind of it's going to look way overly complicated, but basically what this is this was something I was working with someone I was coaching the other day on. And this is basically like they're at a steady pace of signing 3 new customers a month. And so we were looking at, okay, so assuming that that's going to happen and you sign 3 new customers a month and you've got a 5% churn, we say like by the end of next year, you're going to be doing, 61 grand a month in revenue. And so what you want to then do, and we're actually in process of doing this, so this isn't built out, is like, say you like forecast your next 12 months. What you want to do is kind of like build the vision of like, what does your company look like? Basically, down the line, once it's kind of complete. So maybe like look at 12 months from now, assuming that you've grown by X amount. And then you want to start kind of filling in here. And like, so these numbers are actually definitely quite a bit off because it's actually just copy and pasted from some of my Content Allies stuff. But like, what is your salary going to be? And then like, okay, at what point are you going to pull in someone to help with your finance and bookkeeping? How much are you going to be spending on marketing as you grow? What's your software expenses going to be? How much are you going to be spending on virtual assistants? When are you going to hire that salesperson or something to help out there? Or when are you going to hire a head of operations? And starting to look at that. And so kind of what I guess I'm getting at whenever like the activity log is one way you can look at that, but I think that that's almost kind of like reactive hiring. But I think for a lot of people, when you're in the weeds of it, that's probably where to start. But where to kind of share, like at this point, I don't reactively hire anybody anymore. What I do is like I have something like this built for Content Allies that basically shows us scaling from like our current 30 grand a month all the way up to, like about, I think 250 grand a month or wherever there. And it's like, okay, this is what our company is going to look like at different milestones. Okay, so once we're at 75 grand a month, we're going to have XYZ team members in place. Once we're at, 50 grand a month is when we make this next key hire in like marketing or whatever that is. Once we hit 120 grand, like, and so that's kind of the goal is like build this like end vision in mind. And then work backwards to kind of plan out your hires and what you can hire at each stage. That's kind of more how I actually do it now, as opposed to the reactive hiring. But this is kind of what I would say is one of the things to kind of just like build out that financial model and then figure out what you can afford at each stage of the business.
No, I love that. That makes a ton of sense. I remember we didn't build anything out that complex, but we had like hiring ratios for my previous company. So we knew like when we X number of customers, we needed this many of certain positions. So that kind of helped us like forward think and hire in advance. But
Yeah, I love that. That's
really
a good, great framework to kind of put around that as well. And then like, and then like at that, at some point you're like, oh, then we need the marketing person or like the salespeople. I think that's where the roadmap comes in, but I like the ratios for like, we had a similar thing at Lead Cookie where it was like, okay, every 10 customers, we need a new pod of, VAs.
Yep.
But then it was like, okay, at what point do you hire the strategist and the salesperson thing? I think that those are the larger ones to plan out. So I like that.
Awesome. We had one other question come in from Ben. He asks, do you have any rule of thumb for knowing when it's a good time to hire your first manager?
It totally depends on this. It's this whole thing where like it's really kind of up in the world of like preference on this. Like I've got friends who run their businesses and really don't hire a lot of people, and like they'll end up just being like they'll be like taking home like 20 grand a month and like hardly hiring out anybody and like doing all the work themselves, and it's like, or majority of it themselves, and it's like, okay, that's that's cool. And then you've got the flip side, where my side, I tend to hire early, and I'm just like, okay, I want stuff off my plate. Like I want freedom. Like freedom's really important to me. And so I'll hire early, kind of take less profitability in the short run to have more freedom or longer term scalability. I've got another friend who's doing like 180K a month, and he's still like running sales at his company. And it's just like, it's all totally preference as to like, when you make these hires, there's no absolute right or wrong, and something like service delivery, like, the hiring ratios make sense if like you need people to specifically do that kind of work. But I think once you get to the leadership roles, the rest of it kind of comes into really like, because it's the interesting thing. Like you as the entrepreneur, it's like my buddy is doing like 180K a month. It's like he could hire a salesperson, and he could probably pay that salesperson 10 grand a month, but then that's like 10 grand a month less he makes. And I guess like it's more profit in his pocket. So he prefers that and chooses to take that and works and hustles. And it's totally like a preference of what it is that you really want. So, I think it's really up in the air there. And like, I've got another guy who's kind of, I'm advising, and he's doing great right now. And he's like, honestly, I'm like fine with the workload. They've like just grown. They like tripled their clients. He's like, but I think like I don't think I need a project manager yet. He's like, but yeah, probably maybe like 10, 15 more clients, maybe. But like, he's just doing super well, super profitable. And so it's like, a lot of times people feel like, oh, I'm growing, like I need to hire, but like you don't have to. Like you don't have to hire just because. And if you cannot hire, then like figure out a way to just be more efficient. Like that's awesome. So I don't think there's any rule of thumb there. It's all just kind of up to you in that sense.
No, it makes total sense. Cool. Well, I don't know if you guys have any other questions you want to toss in. Let me know here. I know we're coming up on kind of the hour. I guess if we see anything come in here, but Jake, thanks so much, man. This was a great ton of really good information.
Yeah, no problem. And I saw the blank version of that spreadsheet, so I'm happy to kind of share the spreadsheet here as well. And I'll share the slide decks and things with you as well, Tyler. So
okay,
happy to put that out there to everybody.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions. So thanks so much, guys, for hopping on, and thank you, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, Tyler.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you found the content valuable, here are 2 ways that I can help you actually completely free to grow and scale your service business. Number 1, just head over to productized.services, and you'll be able to subscribe to our free weekly strategy newsletter. And number 2, get my Productized playbook over at productizedplaybook.com. And this playbook is actually directly pulled from our recent Design to Exit course, one of the 5 playbooks. And we're giving away that for free, where you get access to kind of see a full breakdown of essentially, how we think about productizing services, etc. So definitely head over to productizedplaybook.com.